Bundesliga match day 10, and we have had our third sacking of the season. So let's review it. So the opening match day of the season proved to be the most critical for this person's future, as Werder Bremen beat Wolfsburg 2-1. What that has resulted in is Paul Simonis now being sacked. He leaves with 2 wins since the start of the season, against Heidenheim on the first game of the season and Hamburg, where they really shouldn't have won. And so this means Wolfsburg have continued to be probably one of the worst jobs in the league, as they throw loads of money at the problem because obviously they're backed by Wolfsburg and get nothing in return. I mean, you look at how much they've spent over the past couple of years. This summer they spent 41 million and they also brought Christian Eriksen in on a free transfer, but I doubt that would have been cheap. The year beforehand they spent 44 million. The year before that they spent 75 million. The year before that, 36. Year before that, 81 million. And so they're spending this like a lot of money that even like Borussia Dortmund won't spend. And they've spent it on absolute mid, basically. And any sort of like good functioning team they've had just doesn't exist anymore. The team that they qualified in the Champions League with in 2021, Lacroix has left. Baku, Mickey van der Ven, Xlever Schlager, Wout Weghorst, the most prominent goal scorer over that time. So they've thrown all this money at this problem, thinking, oh yeah, we've cooked, and whatever they have cooked, it's now burned. I mean, Lovro Mayer joined with like loads of promise, and he's failed since moving. Same with Andres Skov Olsen. He had a good promise in Belgium, and he struggled since moving here as well. And the current like flop is Vinny Souza. I mean, he's done nothing since joining from Sheffield United in the summer. But you kind of get the point. Wolfsburg throw all this money at the problem and get nothing in return. And obviously it doesn't help when you have someone who just invests in Danish players all the time. But then for Simonis, granted he's already being linked with a move to Ajax, but he left a good project at Go Ahead Eagles for this. Like obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, but it was just like why? You left the club that you took to Europe for the first time in their history. You ended a 100-year trophy drought, and then you moved to Wolfsburg and are sacked within 3 months, when you could have taken Go Ahead Eagles into Europe and continued to build on your legend from there before moving elsewhere. And so now like the names linked to Wolfsburg, it's just a bit of a joke. Urs Fischer, Bruno Labbadia, Tim Walter, okay, you kind of get it. But like, Wolfsburg just continue to go back. Like, if they were, well, first of all, if they weren't bankrolled by Volkswagen, they wouldn't be in the position beforehand. But like, the fact that they're bankrolled by Volkswagen helps them massively. But for Bremen, they've obviously, everyone thought they were crap at the beginning of the season, which is, you know, fair enough. Now, under Horst Steffen, once players came back from injury and they were able to buy players as well, things have started going in an upward direction. Obviously they still haven't, like against the big teams that they've played against, they have struggled, apart from Leverkusen at the beginning of the season. Obviously this is a step in the correct direction, and they're actually kind of near the European places now. I think they're 7th at the moment, and against Wolfsburg they did deserve to win as well. And so after the initial like shock therapy of the initial Horst Steffen era, everything's kind of settled now, and they look like a good team. I mean, Victor Boniface has looked like a good acquisition for them up top. I mean, his assist for the winner was very Boniface. In fact, he tried a bicycle kick, completely cocked it up, but it landed at Samuel Mbangula, who was able to score. And so Horst Steffen's Werder Bremen is definitely a team to continue to watch out for as they continue to develop, and the younger players continue to get more experienced. On Saturday afternoon, you had 5 of the top 6 playing, and so it was a big Saturday afternoon. Standout result was Union Berlin drawing 2-2 with Bayern Munich, and so Bayern actually dropped points for once, and that you thought, okay, maybe this team is not as invincible. Obviously, technically they are still invincible, but not as invincible as you first thought. They looked very leggy following their midweek win in the Champions League against PSG, and so they couldn't handle the terrible, which is Union Berlin. Union took the lead through Danilo Doherty. Luis Diaz then scored a ridiculous goal from a ridiculous angle, but in very much like Luis Diaz's core, minutes later, he missed a clear one-on-one chance with Fijigrano. Doherty then scores again in the 82nd minute, and it looked like Union had won it. But then Harry Kane scores in the 93rd minute to rescue a point. So Union were unlucky in this game, especially because of what happened right at the beginning of the game when Ilias Ansa scored, but it was ruled out for offside. Granted, okay, devil's advocate, offside's offside. If you're offside, then you're offside. But Ansa was offside by millimetres, like literal millimetres. Something that the human eye could not possibly see at all. It was ruled out, and obviously this has sparked a lot of debate about should it count, should it not count, because offside is offside. And so Ansa was offside, so the goal should be ruled out. But then it's the fact that this is such a ridiculous small part is offside, like there's no leeway anymore. Granted, there shouldn't be really any leeway for the offside rule, but you kind of get the point that I'm getting at. So whether this is the start of something for Bayern or it's just a one-off, I think it could be a one-off because apart from Leon Goretzka starting in this game, it was basically the exact same team in midweek, and Union is not an easy place to go to. But then on the other hand, Union have now kind of set a precedent for how, maybe this is how you beat Bayern potentially. Will this lead to anything? Probably not. But obviously, okay, Bayern dropped points, Now it's time for the likes of Dortmund and Leipzig to make up ground on them. In typical Bundesliga fashion, this did not happen. Dortmund were leading 1-0 against Hamburg, and you thought, okay, Dortmund have done it somehow. Then in the 97th minute, they conceded a header to draw the game, and meaning no ground has been made up on Bayern. And it has again brought into questions about Dortmund's style of play. Because again, Dortmund were quite shit. I mean, in midweek against Manchester City, I was there, and they were quite bad then as well. And it's the fact that, okay, defensively, you're okay, you can grind out a result. But it's on the attacking front where they're really struggling. I mean, against Hamburg, they had one shot on target in the whole 90 minutes. And that was their goal. And there's no one creating anything, as I said before, there's no one kind of grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck and willing Dortmund forward. And it's having an impact on Serhou Guirassy as well. Granted, there's questions about his fitness. But against Hamburg, he had 2 touches in the opposition box, and he was subbed off in the 90th minute. And granted, okay, you can maybe ask, Guirassy probably needs more service, and Dortmund need a creative player. But then you also have to go, Guirassy needs to be benched. As good as he can be on his day hasn't happened in a while, and Fabio Silva has looked quite lively off the bench. So I think it's a valid argument to play Silva over Guirassy. At least while Guirassy rests, and if he does have any underlying injury problems, they disappear. But what this is shown is this style of football was meant to avoid results like this. So Dortmund of the past where they go hell for leather, and they'll be leading 4-0, and they end up drawing the game 4-4 against a low league opposition. That was meant to be avoided, but here it's still happened. I mean, they were lucky against Augsburg. They were very lucky against Cologne, and this was where their luck has run out. And so Dortmund have been riding their luck in recent games, and they really need this creative player. Because as good as Maximilian Bayer and Karim Adeyemi are, it's not working with Guirassy. You need that bridge between them all. It's getting to the point now where the 3 of them playing together doesn't really work. And so you need someone to kind of bridge that gap. Obviously, you have the likes of Joe Bellingham, Kani Chukwuemeka's fitness is a problem. Well, who knows what's going on with Joe Bellingham? But it's definitely a problem for Dortmund, and I think we're just under 2 months away from the winter transfer window. And I think if Dortmund want to improve their team, you need a creative player of some sort. Because as of right now, Dortmund are really just riding their luck half the time. But for Hamburg, they're up to 13th now, and considering that against Dortmund, you could probably argue they were the better team. Again, it's another positive, and I'm probably quite confident to say Hamburg are probably going to stay up now. I mean, you look at the teams below them, a lot of them a lot worse. They'll be okay. And then obviously the other team that struggled to capitalise on Bayern was Leipzig. They lost 3-1 to Hoffenheim. It was their first loss since the loss to Bayern Munich on the opening day. And obviously they're relying on Yan Diomande a bit more in recent games, or you could argue it's just Yan Diomande like showing his quality. And it's probably time we have a conversation about Hoffenheim. Like, how good are they actually? Because they're sick and they've continued to make good strides under Christian Ilse. They're definitely an outsider for like a European spot if they continue as they are. Then the other Saturday game saw Bayer Leverkusen smash Heidenheim 6-0. There's not really a lot you can say about Heidenheim really. Well, they do think, and I'm not going to say they do it, or they should. I do ever wonder, do they think, maybe we should sack Frank Schmidt at some point? I'm not saying they should do it, I'm just questioning whether, they've thought about it. It's there in the back of their mind going, do it. But for Leverkusen, again, like in midweek, they kind of needed to grind out this win against Benfica in the Champions League. And here they just kind of showed off really. Ibrahim Marza has Leverkusen has been a bit of a mess in the early stages of the season, but he's really shown his quality in recent weeks, and he did it again here as well. And he's kind of adopted this centre midfield position instead of more like one of the two players behind the striker in Leverkusen's system. Then in the late game on Saturday, we had the Rhine derby. It was back after a year because Cologne were obviously in the second division, and Gladbach are back. They won 3-1. It was 2 wins in a row now. Goals from Philip Sander, Haris Tabakovic and Kevin Dix. There was a late consolation penalty from Luka Waldschmidt, but it was just a case that Gladbach had the energy and will to win, whereas Cologne kind of didn't. Maybe it was because Cologne were better than them, but they obviously weren't. And Gladbach now have a bigger winning streak than Bayern Munich. And obviously Haris Tabakovic again kind of showed his quality, well, not his quality, but his the form that he's having at the moment. Tim Kleindienst could return before the end of the month, and there's going to be a real problem, selection problem. Who do you play? Because Tabakovic is in form, but Tim Kleindienst last year was a Germany striker, and that's kind of the predicament Eugen Polanski will face. And again, these 2 wins in a row have shown that Gladbach are probably going to keep Eugen Polanski now. The way Gladbach play obviously isn't pretty, but it's getting the job done for what they need at the moment, and that is to not get relegated. So this is a step in the right direction for Gladbach. Obviously they're a long way off the team that you hope them to be, challenging for Europe, playing this attractive football, but it's a step in the right direction. And Gladbach still have a favourable run of fixtures ahead of them as well. I mean, they play Heidenheim next, then Leipzig, and then they play St. Pauli in the Pokal. And if Gladbach win the Pokal, they could make a run for the DFB Pokal, a run to the final. I've said this before in the past, and they've crashed out to some Saarbrücken, Hanover, Darmstadt. There's some of the teams they've lost against in the past few years. But I also think we kind of need a conversation about Cologne. I've said before, Cologne, they've played easy teams, and people got angry at me and were saying oh, he's a Gladbach fan, he's a bit biased. But if you look at who Cologne have played, and you look at the teams that Cologne have played, the only team that they've won against in the top half was Hoffenheim. Stuttgart, Leipzig, Dortmund, they all lost. Fine, they lost in the Pokal, but point still stands. And then in this big game, not in terms of table position, but in terms of meaning, they lost this as well. Obviously, there's the argument you play who's in front of you, and there's not really much Cologne can do. But I think as much as they're in this position because they've played teams who've been struggling or have not been as good as they were last season, and that has helped them get into this current position. And they are definitely reverting to type now. And so if you're a Cologne fan and you're going to get angry and comment, oh, he's just being biased again, there is my argument. And you'd be like, oh, Mainz were good last season. Mainz are in the relegation zone. Wolfsburg are near the relegation zone. Freiburg are in mid-table. And on to Freiburg, they won their first game in 6 games after beating St. Pauli 2-1. And that means for St. Pauli, that's now 7 losses in a row. It really brings into question, okay, what do they do with Alexander Blessin? Because things are clearly malfunctioning. I mean, St. Pauli went the first 3 games of the season unbeaten. They haven't won a game since, or even got a point since, which I think is quite funny in a way. Stuttgart beat Augsburg 3-2. Stuttgart came from behind twice to beat Augsburg. It was a real big 2 sides of Alexander Nubel here. Again, someone commented under one of the clips that I posted, Nubel's a good goalkeeper. And I think you showed the 2 sides of Nubel here. where he made some good saves to keep out Augsburg, but then he also played a suicide ball to Atakan Karazor, which meant Karazor got dispossessed and Augsburg scored from it. And that was basically similar to his mistake against Bayern Munich last season. And Dennis Undav is back. He scored twice now and he's had a good return from injury. And I think Undav is already like a third of the way to his tally from last season. And he did miss chunks of this season due to injury. I mean, and since his return, he's had 7 games and he has 5 goal contributions. And for obviously the big talking point around Stuttgart has been the absence of Maximilian Mittelstadt and Angelo Stiller from the Germany squad, and this performance was a big, fuck you to Nagelsmann for not picking them, because obviously, like, you have Leon Goretzka still in the Germany squad, and Leo Zane has got recalled to the Germany squad, and it really makes you question the decision making here, because Mittelstadt is probably Germany's best left back. He's probably better than David Raum, because Raum is a bit of a crossing merchant, and then Stiller is meant to be like the future of Germany's midfield, alongside either Joshua Kimmich or Alexander Pavlovich. And so you kind of want to be building on that with him. He's not injured or anything, and he's been playing well, as Sebastian Hoeneß has pointed out as well, but he just hasn't been called up. And instead you're favouring people like Goretzka, Zane, Nadim Amiri. You're favouring these type of people who haven't performed with their club. Their club is not performing, and they've been called up instead. I mean, even he's called up 4 goalkeepers. You don't need 4 goalkeepers, and especially considering after this international break, there's only 1 more before the World Cup, and none of these players are kind of like brand new, apart from Saïd Amala, who you're testing out. It's a really questionable decision not to call up Stiller and Mittelstadt. So the final game of the match day was Frankfurt versus Mainz. Frankfurt won this 1-0. It was a ball fest. There was only 1 shot in the first half. Duran scored the winner in the 79th minute or whatever. But Mainz are seriously drifting at the moment. And, it just hasn't functioned. I mean, they had a good win against Fiorentina in midweek, which clearly shows they're doing something right. But nothing is seemingly functioning in the Bundesliga. So the table, Bayern are obviously still 6. They've actually extended their gap to 6 points after a Leipzig loss. So Bayern are on 28, Leipzig on 22, Dortmund and Stuttgart are both on 21, Leverkusen on 20, and Hoffenheim are in 6th on 19. And then at the bottom, St. Pauli are 16th on 7, Mainz are 17th on 5, and Heidenheim are 18th, also on 5. And the biggest mover has been Gladbach, who moved up to 12th with their win, and they're on 9 points. Obviously, we're in the international break now, but we return with a pretty big game between Dortmund and Stuttgart. Bayern also play Freiburg. Leverkusen play Wolfsburg, who will have their new head coach potentially. Frankfurt play Cologne, and then Leipzig play Werder Bremen in the return in the Ole Werner derby. So let me know what you think about this match day. Were Union Berlin unlucky? Who should replace Paul Simonis at Wolfsburg? And any other thoughts you have?